brain is most complex known object in the universe as far as our scientists know. Yeah, because they can only look at it from the perspective of the brain. So they're like, yeah, the brain is the most complex thing. They can't look outside of the brain. So there could be something way more complex, but because our brain can't register it, we can't see that. So we're like, yeah, the brain is the most complex. That's true because our scientists say it. But okay, I take you for your word. I don't know if scientists say that, but you say scientists do, so I'll go with that. What I'm wondering about is, do you believe in other worldly things like souls? Consciousness is a word that doesn't really mean much. So can this material world be only things that exist in a way? And what we call a soul is just the result of brain activity. Does this whole non-duality thing need to be mystical? Or is it just science or reality? I don't know what people mean by soul. Some people use the word soul as like the bottom of your foot. Some people use the word soul as this like entity that lives inside the body and carries on after people die. And some people use the word soul as in like the soul of music, soul music. So I don't really know. I presume you mean it as in like this entity which carries on. And it doesn't really matter if there is like this soul which carries on or doesn't. That's not the point. The point is the belief that that soul is you, and the belief that that soul is separate. So even if there is this phenomenon of like some energy inside of us which carries on from this life to the next life or goes to heaven, that's just part of the story. What non-duality is pointing to is the observer, that which observes, isn't separate from that which it's observing. So the subject and the object aren't separate. So I don't really mind about all these types of things. Like there could be so many complex things happening in this world, and so many more things happening than what we know about or talk about. More than likely there is, because we've made up language anyway, so our language only fits what we currently know about. And I never forget that story I read once about like these Aboriginal people had never seen boats before. And I mean, maybe they'd seen small boats, but never big boats. And when they came towards their island, the locals couldn't work out what's happening, because they could see different formations happening in the water, but they couldn't see the boats because they didn't know what a boat was. So they just couldn't see it. And it wasn't until they got closer and until people started coming off the boats that they began to recognize that there was this like floating house in the sea, or what they thought was a floating house. So until they had labeled it, they couldn't really see it, which is really kind of crazy, like what our brain is doing. So imagine what could be out there. But that's different from non-duality. Non-duality is talking about this freedom, which is watching right now, no matter what crazy dream we have about this reality, whether we have multiple dimensions and lots of souls and afterlife and heaven and hell, that's all part of the story happening in apparent time. Does this whole non-duality thing need to be mystical? No, not at all, because we made up the word mystical. So it doesn't need to be mystical. That's our concept. People like that. I mean, what you could say is non-duality is mystery, but that's a word that we use to point at something which we just don't know what it is. We can't describe it in words. But yet it's here watching. But we can't stand outside of it and look at it and name it. Or is it just science? Science is another myth and another dogma that we've made up and we believe in. Like it's great science and it does great things, but like isn't it like quantum physics and string theory, like they're trying to make them bridge, but they can't, and both of them seem to have truths in them, but they can't make them bridge. They don't work together. I'm not sure if that's true, but if that is the case, then it's like seeing that also science is man-made. Science isn't truth either. It is true, it's fact. We made up fact, we make up science. There seems to be things that are pointing more to something like there appears to be evolution in this world, and evolution came from the idea of science. But also you could look back at what the idea of God was, that all of this is made by God. And then if you look at science, science would say everything is made up of energy. And then if you named God as energy, then there would be the same things. Well, whatever you realize, the truth, can it be just brain doing its thing? Is it more natural, a more natural way? The brain can interpret what happened, but no, what happened is what happened. And that, I mean, like, it depends how you label brain activity. If you label brain activity as everything that's happening in this world, then yeah, it's brain activity. But it's beyond the brain activity, the truth. Like, so that realization is beyond the brain activity. Yeah, that begins to get really complex. I'm tripping myself over in words there. I can't really answer that question. It depends on what we mean. Science works much better than anything else. You're using technology, right, thanks to science, right? So it works. It is the truth. I don't know if I would label science the truth. I would see that as a dogma, another dogma. But it seems to have more coherence with what's happening. So it's a better way of describing things. So it's a better way of us manipulating our environment in order to be creative than other systems. But I wouldn't say it's truth. If it was truth, then why can't they link up quantum physics and string theory? Like, why can't they work gravity? I think it's gravity into quantum physics. Like, why don't they meet? Whatever you realized that thanks to your brain. The brain recognizes it's happening, so the brain registers it. And if the brain was here, then this world wouldn't be happening. But you're getting obsessed with the idea of brain. Like, if everything is brain, then it's still oneness. Like, if everything is an interpretation of the brain, then it's still oneness. Like, what makes up the brain? How is it a dogma if it works? It's a dogma because you believe it to be truth. It seems to work, so we seem to be able to use science to manipulate particles, to manipulate energy. So we can use these systems to manipulate our environment better. But that doesn't mean it's truth. It doesn't mean that gravity is truth. That's the way of us describing it in order to manipulate our environment. Yes, they don't know how quantum and gravity works. Science don't know everything yet. It's never going to know everything. We made up words. We made up science. We are like tiny little beings with this tiny little language. Your brain is oneness, okay. It depends how you phrase. I mean, like, if you said everything was brain, but like brain activity. Because I also say at other times, like, we're walking through our brains, like that's true in a way as well. It gets complicated, these details. But to rest in peace in the knowledge that everything that I teach intellectually isn't it. Like, what's it is what's happening right now. The mind goes back and forwards, true, false, fact, fiction, lie, truth. I said that. And then what is it that's here right now? What else is happening? You're using technology right now thanks to science. Yeah, science has done a good job at manipulating matter to work better for us. I will agree. Doesn't mean it's truth. I suppose maybe you don't understand what I mean by the word truth, like the way I'm using the word truth. So you and other people, not you particular, but other people have invented this word science, and it's invented ways to create experiments, and it's invented all these different words and all these different labels. So they were invented, and then we think that our way of thinking about things is things. So we think that the computer is computer, that I am I, that the wall is wall. And we believe in these things. So we believe in this idea of science. But what I'm trying to say is that everything is ideas. They're not truth. There is no truth. And our language is based on subject-object. Our science is based on that. Although science is getting really into it and really beginning to see that there isn't subject-object, and then it gets very confused, but doesn't really know what to do with that. I mean, how can we really interpret that quantum physics in some way suggests that things appear because they're observed, and when they're not observed, they're all possibilities? I mean, that's way beyond our possibility to digest that information in words. But yet in this moment, it's true. Right here, right now. Like everything is all possibilities simultaneously. Yeah.